At the Stabile Center for Investigative Journalism this year, we were given the job of looking at poverty in New York City. My beat was food and hunger. I heard the term food desert before, but didn't really know what one was until I moved to Harlem. I looked on the U.S. Department of Agriculture's website, and they define an urban food desert as an area where someone without a car would have to walk a mile or more for fresh produce. According to that map, no one in Harlem, or any other part of Manhattan for that matter, has food access issues. But just walking around the neighborhoods, you realize there aren't a whole lot of healthy and nutritious options. I started to question the government's metrics and how accurate a picture they were really painting of food access in the 5 boroughs. That maybe distance isn't the only meaningful sticking point. With 5-story walk-ups and crosstown buses being a common obstacle, perhaps time was the more telling metric. So how does the city look at the problem of food access? Reading through the Bloomberg administration's food policies, I noticed that they all centered around a store's retail area, just floor space, length times width. But what about the stores packed to the ceilings with goods? In New York, when you run out of square footage, you start stacking vertically. So what about volume? One city initiative helps make this point. Called the Fresh Program, it offers significant financial incentives to businesses that agree to build 4,000 square feet or more of retail space in low-income areas and devote 40% of that area to fresh produce. But after visiting one of these stores, it seemed like the fresh produce took up something less than 40% of what the store was selling. The reason being that the city was counting shopping aisles in other areas that didn't have fresh food into that figure. Given that, retail area didn't seem to matter as much as retail volume. So how many fresh produce and healthy options are really available to New Yorkers? To answer that, I decided to take a look at the place where most lower-income New Yorkers get their food, and that's bodegas, or corner stores you can find on almost every block. It's a simple question: what's inside these stores? As you can see, the front of this bodega is filled with snacks and junk food. The cooler here only has minimal offerings of fresh dairy products. When my attempt to get data on these shops from the city failed, I decided to take a quantitative approach and collect my own numbers. After many attempts, I finally found a bodega owner who let me come in his shop with a tape measure and sketch pad. I took down the length, width, and height of all the shelving units and coolers. To put it all together, I decided to map it out. Then, using SketchUp, that map became this. The volumetric representation gave me the freedom to not only compare the quantities of healthy food options being sold, but also to show the relevant placement of these items. This allowed me to show not only how much of the volume was dedicated to nutritious food, but also where is it physically located inside. Once I crunched the numbers, I found that only 0.9% of the store consisted of fresh produce. But how did this compare to other stores? Some of these stores, though, were so big that it required more than just a tape measure. I used a measuring wheel on 100-foot-long aisles in the Bronx, and to capture the interior dimensions of a Costco, it required a laser rangefinder originally designed by the Forestry Service for measuring old-growth trees. By modeling my findings, I could make meaningful comparisons, and, by extension, make some meaningful analysis of public policy regarding food sales. But availability is just one factor. Let's go to East Harlem, to where the smallest Fresh Program grocer is. The owner tells me that these are the boundaries of where his customers would come. But when you apply a 1-mile range ring like the USDA would, you would see this. Although this is just one example, you can see that there can be a big difference between what the federal government thinks this store can reach versus what it does in practice. When you compare these areas, you see that the government's estimates are off by a factor of 4. So if the federal government's metrics on distance are off by that much, imagine what we can find when we look at travel times and how those shape a person's access to healthier foods. I don't have that answer right now, but I'm making this work my master's thesis. Over the next 6 months, I'll be combining satellite imagery, volumetric data, nutritional density, and human performance factors to see if there's a better way to gauge how easy it is for New Yorkers to get healthy food. And if I'm successful, maybe the USDA can revise their metrics and reframe the discussion in a way that helps to improve access to better food and lead to healthier outcomes.